Get ready to plunge into the electrifying world of tech news with the Next Tech Check podcast. Hosted by SmartTech Research's Mark Vena and NextCurve's Leonard Lee. This podcast offers bold insights, controversial debates, and monitors the pulse of innovation. It's the only podcast committed to keeping what's next in tech in check.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vena, CEO and Principal Analyst at SmartTech Research, and this is Leonard Lee, founder.
Hey, guys.
Leonard would even make me finish his title. Founder and Executive Analyst at NextCurve. Welcome to the Next Tech Check podcast. Today is Tuesday, November 28th, 2023. Good afternoon, Leonard. How are you? You're in the bowels of Las Vegas. How are you doing?
Yeah, it almost feels like I live here.
Yes,
I'm here like all the time. This must be like the 8th or 9th time this year. And unfortunately, I end up staying for like a whole week. And one of the things that you must always remember to get at a CVS, okay, you don't want to buy it at a hotel, is chapstick. If you don't buy chapstick, man, like right now, I was sitting in a session, I could just feel my lips chapping as we were sitting there because I was deprived of water during that session, right? And so anyway.
And you have to have good
Buy
walking
chapstick.
And you have to have good walking
too.
shoes. That's
And yeah, we're here at the Wind. Yeah, and as you said, I'm here for Amazon's reInvent 2023, and as many of you probably know, this is their premier event. This is a big event for them. And excuse me, it's so dry. I'll occasionally cough. You'll have to excuse me. But for the analysts, they have a summit, and it takes place at the Wind. The rest of the event is taking, or the main part of the event is taking place over at the Venetian and Palazzo, the Venetian Convention Center, and several other venues. I mean, it's massive. I think they have about 65,000 people here this year.
No, it's not.
At least that's the number I heard floating around. Yeah, so.
Right, that's not your typical vendor event. I mean, that's a big number.
It's big. Yeah. Big user. I mean, think of it as a user group, developer, everything combined kind of conference. Yeah.
When you consider CES as like a good CES numbers, generally 120,000, 130,000 kind of pre-pandemic. That's a big number, 65 for a single company, to host. So,
well, yeah, I see. Yeah. Go ahead.
No. Well, I want to get into that in detail, but I do want to hit the one topic.
Oh, yeah.
That I'd like to kind of opine on. Last week I was at the MediaTek Executive Summit in beautiful Laguna Niguel, California. That was another not a shabby place to be, and I think MediaTek quite well as well, like I do, Leonard. And it was an interesting event because they really didn't announce anything big. They had their prior major announcement. They announced their flagship chipset, the Dimensity 9300, which is really a very, very solid competitor to Qualcomm's the latest Snapdragon offering. And for those people who don't know who MediaTek is, they have a bit of a they're in 2 billion devices. I mean, there's the highest probability they're in a device that's somewhere in your home. And they have kind of the reputation of being the value proposition cost alternative to Qualcomm. And, they have a very strong market share percentage in non-Samsung Android phones like Huawei and others.
Right.
And but they announced their flagship solution, which, by the way, is pretty if you believe the benchmark numbers they showed, you always got to be a little bit cautious about when a vendor shows you benchmark numbers. They're they're outperforming or certainly in the same ballpark on a number of different benchmarks with Qualcomm's latest offering. So that was, that kind of shows MediaTek's, technical chops, that they actually can, not just be a great, value alternative, but, have, pretty compelling performance. So that was interesting. That was interesting that they kind of dived into. They announced a custom silicon relationship with Meta, on which I thought was fascinating. That the next generation AR/VR glasses that Meta is going to roll out will feature their technology. Not much more detail on that, but they did announce a relationship there. And
that's kind of like a semi-custom thing, right? Deal that they got going on.
yeah,
Right, and is it just for AR and XR? Or I thought it was primarily focused on AR,
it's primarily
like the
AR.
glasses. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. All
it's
right.
primarily AR. You know, and
Yeah.
now who knows what they may be
You never know.
iterating of that
Yeah.
solution that they may be able to pocket it
Yeah.
into other places. The thing
Right.
that was interesting to me, and I would, you know who I was very impressed with? I was very impressed with the CEO of MediaTek, Rick Tsai, because the obvious question that they completely avoided, because Qualcomm obviously announced they have now the Snapdragon X Elite platform that will be available for ARM versions of Windows.
Yeah.
No discussion about that, but yours truly had to ask that question. And I got kind of a, not from Rick, he was on stage with 3 or 4 other executives, and I got kind of a confusing, answer, non-answer
Reflection.
But here's the thing that was impressed me about Rick. Immediately after his keynote, now I've met him a couple of times. He grabbed me and pulled me aside and really went into a lot of detail with some off the record information. That, hey, we have the technological chops to play in that space. You can't use the 9300 as is because it has to be modified in some ways. But if we want to make a decision to play in that market, we can. And so there was no definitive answer on that. And I like to think that they really have to play in that market at some point, because if you're a vendor, you really want to be able to have a complete portfolio of capabilities. You don't want to have, we've got AR glasses, we've got great smartphones that utilize your solution, but you know what? We'd love to be in the PC space, but you guys don't have a solution there. We don't want to use a more expensive Qualcomm solution. So I was very, very impressed with his candor. And I do think that, now that, Qualcomm has kind of opened the kimono on a really compelling ARM play, I think it's going to be very interesting. The PC market's going to be a very interesting space next year. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of movement around ARM, and we'll see what happens. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the AI PC. You have a lot of big players going in there. Qualcomm being probably the largest representing ARM. So I don't know. I mean, I would think for MediaTek, it would be kind of a challenging market to try to pry into early on. I mean, they could fast follow. That's where I think,
Well, it's not a casual decision to go into the PC space, as you know.
Yeah, not close.
No,
right. And Qualcomm's been in the game for quite some time.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and it's not just that. It's funny. When I tell people, we talk about what happened at MediaTek, will they or won't they? It's one of those things that you have to be very careful about, because the ancillary costs, the support, the software, the firmware. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. It's not just, hey, let's
developing the channels, everything. Yeah. I mean, and I think with the Dimensity, I mean, I think there's plenty of play for MediaTek just in the premium segment of the smartphone market, right? I mean, you have Qualcomm, which is really pretty dominant up in that segment. And one of the things that's really telling about Dimensity, 9300 is they it's a 3 nanometer. It's based on TSMC's latest 3 nanometer process. And when you consider that Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 is, if I'm not mistaken, TSMC's M4P process, right? So it's, a generation behind. But from MediaTek's perspective, that's an investment in trying to exert or at least achieve some level of technical leadership, right? And that's not a trivial investment, because the only other company out there right now that has 3 nanometer processors for consumer smartphone, PC, or what have you is Apple.
Right? That's exactly right.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, really interesting. They're definitely making waves. We'll see where they take it in terms of actually
and there was a lot
the
more
market and shifting things in
there was a lot more discussed. I'm giving it short shrift, but they obviously have very ambitious smart auto plans, because they've got a lot of, they
Yeah.
really own many different dimensions of the different subsystems in the car, and I think they do have they do have compelling offerings there. They talked about they now have a Wi-Fi 7 offering for the router. You have a presence in routers in a big way. That's more of a future-proof thing, because Wi-Fi 7 is not really here yet, honestly. But I was impressed with them, and so it was a lot of well spent time, and I'm glad I stopped by. But let's go into the reInvent piece. And let me just start here, because I want to get because you follow Amazon and AWS quite closely. What's amazing to me, and I watched last night's keynote, I watched this morning keynote. I know there's probably a lot of unannounced stuff you probably can't even talk about yet. But the thing that's interesting to me about AWS is that the amount of capabilities they provide, not for large companies can afford to have, they manage their own cloud capability, and they have the infrastructure, they have the cost to do that. But what Amazon does, but more specifically AWS does, is they enable companies that are far smaller, that to have that kind of capability and presence. And we could talk for hours about this. And do it very efficiently, do things on a level of scale that a mid-cap company could never be able to do. So that's kind of my takeaway, in terms of at a macro level. But what kind of caught your eye last night and today, as far as what you can chat about?
It's almost like the obvious, right? I mean, everyone saw it, is all this talk about Gen AI, right? Generative AI. And, I mean, I can understand why they did it. One of the things that bothered me a little bit is they focused so much on it, they didn't really highlight all the other stuff that they've announced and all the other great things that they've innovated on over the past, since last year. And I don't think that any of those things really got the attention that they probably should have deserved. I think it seemed like AWS is really hell-bent on having a response to Microsoft, especially after Ignite. And I don't know, in a way for me, it was a little bit disappointing, because there are many announcements outside of all this Gen AI stuff that I think are really important, because Gen AI is one thing. The other thing is that when you look at all these enterprises looking to do something with Gen AI, if you don't have the data, you're going to have bad Gen AI, right? And one of the things that I just find kind of astounding, as I talk to a lot of companies as well as vendors, is just sort of this assumption at the moment that somehow Gen AI cleans everything up. And that's really not the case. But one of the really cool things that I've had an opportunity to engage in here are some deep conversations, just clarifying conversations with technical leaders within AWS about, well, okay, how do we get from these tools to good, sustainable AI, right? And man, I'm telling you, some really great conversations. Yeah, I just feel really blessed to be here, to be able to have these types of conversations with top AWS technicians that are working with clients to figure out, okay, where does this stuff fit, and then where does it actually work and do something reliably good, right? And the discourse hasn't shifted like that yet. We're still in the phase of like being, fascinated by the shiny object, but that's where we're going to go next, right? Because one of the things I think, that I've been talking about since the beginning of the year is 6 months from now, we're going to be talking about responsible AI, safe AI, and here we are at AWS reInvent 2023, and that is what we're starting to talk about, or at least that discussion is maturing. It's not quite where I think it should be, because people are taking like ethical AI type of concepts and trying to add stuff onto it or extend it a bit. We see some disconnected messaging here around responsible AI, but you see the fragments. They haven't come together, and it's not just AWS that has this issue. I think it's all of them. And
that's a question. Because you're on the ground there. I mean, you're having a lot of off-the-record conversations, which is you know,
Yeah, which I can't say any. I can't say a lot of
right,
stuff,
exactly.
unfortunately.
But the question I have for you, because you and I share this kind of point of view in this race to implement Gen AI, mostly good, sometimes bad, you know. And by the way, AWS is really good at scale. They can do things and really get players to implement those capabilities at a far lower cost than they would be able to do by themselves. Do you get a sense with the folks that you talk to just about the privacy issues, the misapplication of Gen AI? You and I have talked about this before, particularly in images and videos and things like that. Do you get, or is it just, oh, we're so excited about the opportunity, you know, that we got to implement this capability as quickly as possible to enable whatever product and service offerings we have? So give me a sense of what you're kind of hearing, because I'm sure you bring that topic up from time to time.
Yeah, I do. I mean, just from what we've seen in the keynote, and quite honestly, I'll be frank here. I'm a little bit bothered, or let's call it uncomfortable, with the pace of how things are going GA. You know, it's one of the questions I actually asked in an open forum. It's like, well, what kind of standard are you using to go GA, and what sort of, let's say, safe or responsible AI filters and gates have you set up to determine what goes, becomes generally available? And here's an interesting thing. I don't think there is a standard. It's something that we have to figure out, and it's not going to be the same as typical code, like with typical applications and conventional methods that we use for ensuring, let's say, conventional software is secure and such. It's going to be nuanced, it's different, and I think it's an area that is going to be developed over time, but we're not there yet. You know what I'm saying? And I think the question of safe is still squishy, because I think the broad understanding and let's call it good enough understanding of what this technological tool do, and what these tools are able to do, is not well known.
Right.
We all talk about Gen AI, but do we really know what Gen AI is, right? Or are we just throwing it around as a buzzword and talking past each other? And we see this all the time with hyped technologies, right?
I think it's the latter. I think there's a lot of talking past each other, honestly.
No, I'm thoroughly convinced of it, because when I have conversations with certain folks, they clearly don't understand what this stuff is, and it happens all the time. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's why we have analysts.
Right.
It's our job to figure out what the heck is going on.
Well,
right?
It'll be interesting to get your commentary after you get out of there in a few days, after you're able to talk and talk about more fully about something unannounced.
Yeah, I know. This is only day 2, and I'm not even through day 2.
That's exactly right. So anyway, I'm sure we'll follow this up. Let's hit the last topic. We got to talk about this. The melodrama and OpenAI. Yeah, well, I guess we have to, only because I've never really seen anything like this. Because when this first kind of hit the news cycle, my first reaction was, to be very honest with you, I mean, by any measure, the CEO there has done a really good job. I mean, he's really, if you look at it from a business metric standpoint, OpenAI was a science project a few years ago, and now they've turned into this very potent, really kind of the poster child for what AI is all about. And when the news first broke, my first reaction was, he's got, and again, who knows? We still don't really know what happened there. The only thing that the board would disclose is there was a lack of transparency from, and when I hear that to me is, and the guy's performance had been quite well from a business metric standpoint. My first reaction was there was an employee situation, or maybe an inappropriate relationship, or something like that. And then all of a sudden, the soap opera continues. You had, what was it, like 500 of the 700 employees threatened to resign. They're all going to go to Microsoft, and I've never seen anything like this in the space of 2 or 3 days. The board, there's some shenanigans with the board. The there's new guy. The board was kind of reconfigured, and now he's back at the company. So anyway, what can you opine about? I mean, what struck you?
What can I opine about it? Well, what really struck me here was, okay, irregardless of what you think of Sam Altman and what he means to this whole Gen AI movement. I mean, the first question I asked was why.
Yeah.
I didn't want to assume why, but then again, there were inklings of some conflict that was happening, or alarm bells being raised about the rapid commercialization of technology.
Yeah.
And we heard it in the run up to their OpenAI Dev Day, and I started to hear some things during Microsoft's Ignite. And if those of you who watched or attended Ignite, there were a lot of new product announcements that were closely tied to Open AI, in particular the new GPTs, which are kind of, let's call them in a lot of ways like private chat bots that were initially announced at the Open AI Dev Day about a week and a half prior to Ignite. So so there was a little bit of that vibe out in the market, or some rising concerns. And then so I don't know, it just boils down to why. And I think that's still the question that I have in mind is, like, why did these guys decide to pull the trigger?
Yes.
And I think there's a bit of revision, actually not a little bit, a lot of revisionist history going on, where people are saying, well, treating OpenAI as if it was primarily a for-profit concern. It was not. So what's clear to me is a lot of people who have opined about this matter have not read the governance documents or remotely understand the governance structure of the company. It is a nonprofit.
Right.
First and foremost. And in fact, when you go to their site, I don't know if they've changed it since, Microsoft, okay, which I think was the other player that came into the drama here, has no voting rights, has no representation on the board for a purpose. Neither do any of the other investors. In fact, there is a disclaimer that says, treat any investment as if it was a donation. I mean,
it's pretty striking.
It's there. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just citing stuff that is in their governing documents. And that's where you have to start. Then you ask the question, why?
Yes.
And so I think that's still an open question. It's like, well, what happened?
No, it is an open question. And I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think at some point the truth, or at least something close to the truth, has to be has to come out, because and this was not a trivial thing, and I just think at the end of the day, the thing to me, that the way it looks to me from an outsider, if you didn't know any better, was that the board was concerned after they kind of let Altman go. The reality is, they were getting this, the threat that 500 employees was going to resign, which was that would have signaled the end of OpenAI as a meaningful company. And you're right.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe.
Well, no, I thought, it would not have been a plus. It certainly would have been a major shot at them.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not uncommon for. It's unfortunate, but it's not uncommon for that kind of grandstanding to happen, especially when somebody's become a celebrity.
But not 500.
Well, 500 but I always like to point out that most of those employees were hired after, ChatGPT was went public or went in preview, right? So, we have to think of it in terms of, okay, what is the nature of the concern? Okay, meaning the company is for profit. And then the continuum, the time progression of how things transpired over time. Because, let's put it this way, if ChatGPT never happened, It never went public, and ChatGPT didn't garden, or let's say whatever, the 100 million weekly active users, nobody would be talking about this stuff, I think.
Right. No, you're right. No, you're right.
Right, because there are other competitors now. I mean, you have like Lambda 2, you have Cohere, you have like all these, a plethora of other models. All they have to do is front end their thing and then friggin' give the URL to the public, and then one of them could easily supplant OpenAI. Now, some folks will argue, well, you know, OpenAI was leading in, you know, new methods and XYZ, but okay. But the thing that's really valuable at the moment is the mind share and
Yes.
the user base of ChatGPT. At least that's the only thing that I see differentiating it from everyone else that pretty much
Right.
has same capability,
Right.
or something on the continuum of par.
Yes. Well,
So,
we could talk about this for another hour.
I know, forever. It's ridiculous.
But the reality is to your point, you know, all the facts are not known yet. The facts will come out. They can't, something like this will not be wallpapered over. So anyway, I'm going to end it right there, and I'll allow you to have a glass of a badly needed glass of water.
Look at all these people.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
and this is not even the main hall or the main event area. You know,
Yes.
This is like some really remote section of the wind. It's like a ton of people.
Hey, well, Leonard, listen, thanks again for joining the podcast. It was great chatting with you.
Absolutely.
For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the next Tech Check podcast part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast, or use these convenient on-screen QR codes to connect with us. You can follow both Leonard and I on X, formerly known as Twitter, at the handles below. And until next time, have a great week and get some water, Leonard.
Yeah, I need it. And chapstick. Take care, everyone.
Chapstick.
Bye.
Take it easy.